Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to what I'm hoping is going to be a very stimulating and exciting panel around the future of work in the era of AI. Now, I'm not quite sure how long an era is, but I think the first recorded use of AI was about in 1950. It was our friend Alan Turing that first brought it to bear in terms of the UK. And I think the thing that's transformed as we get into the era that's much more close to us now is probably the availability of big data. You know, having all of that data and the copious amounts we all swim through every day in our businesses probably is about now how do we use that data to drive insight and action against our business goals. Now, the reality is some companies are lightly dipping their toe into the water as far as AI is concerned, but there are other companies that are talking about being fueled by AI. So I think there is a very clear continuum about where that adoption is coming in businesses at the moment. I think the reality is there is clearly an efficiency saving here and effectiveness. So 44% of companies believe that the implementation of AI will reduce costs in their business, and it probably will be much higher as that as more user cases come along. And the reality is probably about 375 million workers they believe are going to either have to be reskilled or have career changes by 2030. So it's a significant transformative change in the workforce. And the reality is, I think we probably think people are concerned and worried about AI and the impact on our lives. But you might not know, but a bit of research was done recently where 44% of people said that if a self-driving Uber turned up at their door, actually they'd get in and go with it. So I think probably our trust and confidence in this technology and the impact it might have on our lives is certainly changing as well. Right, well, I'm really pleased to be welcomed by three very highly esteemed colleagues that I've got here that have got a lot of credibility around the world of AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure as an audience you can make that judgment on that they're worthy of being listened to. So I'm going to just ask them each to introduce themselves, a bit about their role in their business and also sort of their expertise around AI. Yeah, thank you, cool. Peter.
So, hi everyone, my name is Peter Graham. I'm a partner development manager at Ingram Microcloud. We support chess and all things cloud collaboration from Microsoft. And I have been researching and doing a lot of the Microsoft certifications on artificial intelligence and part of the early adopters of the newly announced Microsoft 365 Copilot.
Hi everybody, my name is Peter Morris. I'm a partner systems engineer at Cisco. AI is something that we've embraced in our pretty wide portfolio of products and services. It's something that's heavily embedded in many of our platforms and solutions, but also, like a lot of organisations, we're adopting AI operationally across the business.
My name's Andrew Napier. I head up the cloud and security product team at TalkTalk Business Wholesale. We are especially interested in AI from a cybersecurity perspective, and we're also ever driving to get better customer experience by proper application of the customer data that we have. So properly looking after and curating and cleaning that data on a regular basis is a big use case for us.
Perfect. Yeah, I certainly know the challenge of getting data to actually be the data that you actually want rather than a version of something. So yeah, great. Okay, so I'm going to just kick off to sort of set the stage and just ask you all if you could briefly describe what you think AI means for you in a business context, and if you consider it to be a short-term technology game changer, or is it going to be this slow meandering journey towards AI in our business lives? Andrew.
So I think there are loads of definitions of AI. I think what we're seeing now is very narrow but increasingly powerful AIs. So they've got a specific task to do, be it a grandmaster at chess, for example, or something as easily adopted as sat-nav. There's very few stories these days of people driving into the sea because they've been told to by the sat-nav, and that's as a result of learning behind those platforms. But the AI being a tool to achieve a human objective, and an objective that you've not necessarily had to map out step by step for the machine to be able to achieve. So a bit like giving somebody the ingredients and a picture of a cake and then telling them to get on with it. There's no recipe, there's no step by step instructions, there's just ingredients, this is what I want out of it. That enables it to be a very powerful tool for businesses who have an objective, but not necessarily, and they might have the data and the objective, but not necessarily the planned steps to get from one to the other. And that's why I see it as being an exceptionally powerful. It's certainly not a short-term. There are short-term immediate benefits, and in fact, we saw some of that with COVID. So the ability to be able to model a vaccine before you then release it, we can get a vaccine out in 18 months for something we've never seen before. So it's going to be, it's epoch-changing stuff from business and personal life and everything else.
And the reality is, I suppose, that change in terms of all of those people in the workforce, that's a completely different way of working. You try and create the bits that AI can help in terms of efficiency and making things more accurate as well, making decision-making better quality. So you can just see that actually for that to go through in our human lives and our business lives is going to be massive transformation for every business. Brilliant. Peter?
Yeah, I totally agree with Andrew. I think like you mentioned, Oliver, AI is nothing new really in the grand scheme of things, but it feels like the major innovations in artificial intelligence have been around that human element. The big discussion now seems to be around ChatGPT and generative AI, and I think the power in those kinds of models is that it's very easy to interface with as a human being. It's very conversational, right? And maybe another example is the prevalence of smart assistants, things like Alexa and Google Assistant, Siri. It's not something that is restricted to young people. It's something that's very accessible actually to a very wide demographic. But there's a key question there about what use case are we actually applying that model to? And I think in the case of generative AI and those smart assistants, it's because we can engage with them in a conversational manner. And that's something that's very instinctive for us psychologically. But ultimately, I think there is this rising need for more specialized models that maybe we don't need to engage with them in a conversational way. It's a question of what task are we using them to automate, but also what data is available to those models, because things like ChatGPT are models that are trained on publicly available generic data. They're very adaptable. But that's a balance on a scale. And the more generic and adaptable a model is, the less specialized it is. And there is a question there about trust and accuracy, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's really good because the point is that we use all of those things like ChatGPT initially just to think about how can we enrich our daily lives now, whether that's composing a letter or an email or writing a blog or whatever that might be. It's almost how that integration starts to happen, and we're seeing more and more of that now. Peter?
Yeah, just to echo the other two thoughts is in regards to what I see as well, is we've actually been using AI for over 15 years, but it's always been in the background of our day-to-day lives. Like when you're using your car and you use voice to speech text, or if you're going through a mortgage application or a loan application, AI is in the background doing the early legwork before you're even put in touch with an advisor. But where it's really accelerating since COVID, I find, is where we're actually having the AI interact with us is kind of a bit scary for some people, because we're not normally put in front and center of the AI where it's talking back to us. Alexa and the Google side of things have been doing it for a few years in our personal homes, but as a business, the immediate shock for a business is, I don't want anything in my organization to get out. We already have heard of some of the horror stories of some of these AIs, giving off responses and things that you're quite unsure of. But I think that's where, over the last couple of years, it's been accelerating, and they're learning much, much faster than they were 10 years ago. And I think absolutely it will become the most pivotal thing in technology moving forward, because it allows businesses to adapt to change faster, solve medicine problems and challenges and more. And I even read a story recently where a child was asking Alexa to solve a geography query for their homework, and the parent was like, no, And then when they raised this with the teacher was like, no, that's absolutely fine,
Yeah.
because they are able to access this technology to this day.
Yeah.
And, it's not to say that they won't be able to access this technology in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think the speed of integration will also happen as the changing profile of employee age and generation. Now that trying to teach my mother to use Alexa, for example, is now near on impossible, whereas my 3-year-old daughter is using it all the time to get the music she wants and hear the stories she wants. So I think that will happen in the workforce. It will be that people will become more familiar and accustomed with the techniques and the processes to use AI, and then it's going to really start to take off. Good.
Actually, going back to your point about Uber, in that I was surprised that percentage was so high. And then I thought, well, of the entire demographic that ever takes a taxi, how many of those use Uber? Because there's a whole lot of wary people who won't use Uber at all.
Yeah.
So actually, it's a high percentage of people who are already technology adopters.
Yeah. That's good. So if you'd have been on a London taxi rank and you'd have said that to anybody who was getting into a cab, it probably would have been very different just for the type of generation of employee. Yeah, good. So I suppose the key question is, and it's people think about this. Certainly, when you speak to friends and families, you think about what's going to happen to job roles. As they take on more routine tasks, and how do you envisage the sort of evolution of job roles within your individual industries and perhaps technology as a total? So, Peter, would you like to take that one?
Yeah. Well, I was reading a few months ago, just as the whole kind of news bombed with ChatGPT and things like that. BT came out immediately and said, we're cutting 44,000 odd jobs in favour of AI. And that didn't surprise me. I don't think it surprised anybody, because all these roles were support roles. These are where people are engaging with their help desks for common queries that can be solved immediately. And that's where the data that is populated into the most common questions and queries, AI can solve them immediately and get to customers' response at a much more quicker rate. But when it comes down to the risk of people's jobs, everyone has that risk, of course. I have that risk in terms of where will it take my job. But the thing that I always think back to is how AI lets me perform my job faster. I can use it to get 80% of my task done much quicker than I would if I was to work alone. We all talk about collaborating on projects together all the time. We do our best work collaboratively. We use Teams and other forms of communication to work together. And instead of us working where someone might be on leave or something, we could use a virtual assistant to work with. That I can see is absolutely something key to all businesses moving forward. And when it comes to the future of what other roles can we expect that in the future, I can't imagine any role without AI. You can always think of the different applications, from artificial intelligence through Google, a truck driver trying to get to a destination and it recommends a different route. That is powered by AI already. When it comes to somebody serving something in the kitchen and maybe they've not got something on the menu, and AI could potentially say, well, out of all the ingredients you have in your kitchen, you could make up these other dishes. So restaurants and stuff could use AI in those types of applications. And there's just so many different things you can think of that it's just exponentially.
And I think the really good point, so I had some experience of very early adoption of chatbots for support calls and help desk. And it was really interesting because a lot of the discussion was all around how do we make this appear native to a customer? Whereas it was almost seen that a customer or a company using AI was about taking shortcuts. It was about trying to do something on the cheap. Let's get a computer to do it instead of human. Whereas now I think the permission is there that actually people realize that's how you make companies more efficient. So if I get a chatbot now and in my consumer life, I'm quite happy to be speaking to the computer for the first 10 questions of that script before I then get handed off into somebody to then deal with my query.
It's mundane day-to-day stuff
absolutely.
that people kind of think, oh, I'm going into work, I need to respond to the same old queries that people are always bringing up all the time. AI can do the first bit of it, and then when it gets too complex for the AI, then you pass us on to a real human being to go into the nitty-gritty of the real detailed analysis of why it would be. So it can absolutely save a lot of people a lot of time.
No, excellent. Good. Andrew, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I echo the earlier comment about making it easier to do the job. So there was some survey done in the States where about 5% of jobs they reckon could be completely done by an AI. But of the next chunk there was 60% of jobs that had, and of that, 30% of those had elements or tasks within those jobs that could be automated.
Yeah.
So whilst automating for an outcome is squarely AI territory, what AI can't do yet is put that into any kind of context. So it can give you immediate access to customer records, but what to do with those and in what context, the human touch is incredibly important. I mean, I don't think, if I phoned up to query my car insurance claim and I was told the latest update by a chatbot, with a brilliantly excellent sounding voice, great. But when I want a robot giving palliative care to these are big extremes. And there's also the adaptability of humans as well. I mean, if you're thinking about, so narrow AI, which we've got at the moment, which is do one thing brilliantly, and you've got general AI, which is the next step, which is general AI. To replicate what a human can do, I think the fastest computer built, Fujitsu, to replicate 1 second of human neural activity has taken that computer 40 minutes. So we're way off just in terms of computing power, never mind context. So that's how to make it, as you say, how to make your job better or do your job better by using elements of AI, great. Replace the human entirely? Not too sure.
No, I think it's a very good point. So I think it's a much smaller, as you say, percentage of people where jobs are going to just disappear. What I think is, and I think this is why this is an opportunity for all of our businesses now, is that actually if you can free up 20 or 30% of a role, then it allows you to redirect that thinking and that time and that headroom to do things that actually are going to drive more improvements in your business. So I think that's probably going to be, it's not going to be about total replacement, it's going to be about how you add and develop. Yeah, perfect. Good. Okay. So Peter, I'm going to come to you now. So looking ahead, what are the emerging AI trends that you think are going to have the most significant impact on the workforce?
Well, we've kind of floated around this topic of general AI versus specific AI, right? And I think this is a really key example. A lot of these publicly available models like ChatGPT, for example, have very limited access to data, right? And when I reflect on my own usage of those kinds of AI, I quickly run into barriers where I realise it doesn't have access to the same information that I do, right? And actually to cross that bridge is really challenging because we get into all this territory around data sovereignty and confidentiality and these kinds of things like you were speaking about earlier, Peter. So I think that's a key challenge, right? And when I look at how we are adopting AI as a supportive tool for individuals, that's probably the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is how do we give AI access to that information without introducing risk from a security and compliance perspective. So I think that's maybe not super interesting topic, but it's a major challenge that I think a lot of enterprises are struggling with.
I agree with you. I think it is because the AI output is only as good as the data that's given to it, right? And there was a brilliant example with Amazon. So Amazon decided we get hundreds of thousands of job applications. How do we parse that information, right? So we'll give all of the information that we've gleaned from our existing human hirers, and we'll put that information and data into this AI, and then the AI, right, with all of that wealth of experience, should be able to make as good hiring decisions, right? Yeah. Turns out that the hirers of Amazon were very biased towards male applicants, right? Over the period of time, over that data that they gave to that AI. So the AI made a whole bunch of hiring decisions based on massively biased data, right? So that's like, we can't use AI for that. It's like, well, you can. Yeah. You've just got to change the data you gave it in the first place, rather than stop using it and go back to the biased humans. Yeah. So,
absolutely, I think that's a really key point. And there are countless examples where people have used AI in those kinds of applications, and it has gone horribly wrong because it's easy to forget with the elegance of the models that we have available to us now that these are statistical models, and it has no context, like you were saying earlier, Andrew, as to where that bias is actually appropriate. Yeah.
The other thing as well on that is like looking at AI, going to the generalist AI and things like that, and going off this data. we haven't got to where we are now without all these models being trained over the last 5 or 10 years. And as much as, everyone's thinking, oh, AI, and we'll jump into it, it is not a case of we'll jump into it next year or of the year after. If you've got an idea of where AI in a scenario can support your business, it is not the simple case of we've got all this data, let's feed it into AI.
Yeah.
To your point, you have to clean the data. You have to ensure that the data that you're providing the AI is exactly what you're wanting it to understand, because it will find out all the correlations of the data before you've even thought about giving it the data. And I think that's the thing that you have to pay a lot of attention to what it's doing, because it will look at the insights that you've not even thought of, or the correlations that you may not have. So I guess when you're training an AI model, in terms of that, you need to start asking questions around, do they see any correlations of this data? And suggest to it, no, I don't want this correlation in the final model. And this is where these chat bots and things like that, like I was hearing upstairs earlier, somebody was on to very.co.uk support line, and they wanted some support with the product, and they were chatting to their wife at the same time, and then the wife asked what the weather was like, and they didn't realize that they were chatting to an AI assistant, because the AI assistant repeated exactly what they just said, because it got confused, because it's not one of the common questions you'd answer on a support ticket. Hey, what's the weather today? And eventually it says, let me pass you on to my colleague. That was all AI. That was voice to text to voice AI, and they passed them on to a real human being, because the AI struggled twice. And it knew that, to create a better service, it had to pass them on to an actual person, which was quite interesting.
So I think absolutely right. I think fundamentally businesses are going to have to go through a period of setting themselves up to accept this technology and this intelligence. And I think it, as you said, it comes down to compliance, it comes down to classification of data, and all of those things that if you're not careful, you're just going to get this intelligence sucking out stuff that might have very unintended consequences. So I do know, Peter, you're sat at the end there, and I know you're eagerly awaiting potentially a Copilot license in the near future. So just, Microsoft have done a lot of really good marketing about Copilot and how that's going to impact. Just give us your view on Copilot and what that's going to do for business and roles.
It's going to completely transform the way we work. Microsoft 365 has always been at the forefront of everyone's productivity in their kind of base. They've got the biggest hold of businesses in terms of what they do, how they do their best work, and Copilot is Microsoft's next iteration of that. So it is effectively a chatbot built into 365, allowing you to get your best work done faster. So say I'm in an Excel document and I can't quite remember the formula that I need to do to calculate 2 different columns. I can say, hey Copilot, compare this column to this column and give me a percentage of an average or something. And it can immediately instinctively do that. Or I want to visualize this data in a chart, and Copilot will look at the data and paste it as a chart or into a Power BI dashboard. Say I need to start a presentation in PowerPoint, and I want to base it off the minutes taken from a meeting that I had, and I took down all the minutes down in Word. It can instinctively create a presentation and say, I wanted to use my company branding, and I can get it to create all this amazing work. Again, going back to my earlier point of getting 80% of my tasks done much quicker and faster. It is going to be quite interesting to see when it eventually launches for small, medium-sized businesses. It is coming for enterprise customers later this year. The biggest hurdle, I think, for some companies is the justification of the license cost. It's going to be around $30 a person. Now, this is nearly double the price of a standard, 365 license. And there's some businesses out there that are going to kind of question, that's more money that I'm spending just on my emails and my Word and my PowerPoint for this user. How can I justify this immense cost of AI based on what it is? And it goes back to our earlier point of, it can get a lot of your jobs done. The mundane tasks that make our boring jobs, it can help us get through all the thick of it and come out the other end of, right, I've done all the mundane tasks have been done by AI. I can now focus on what I'm really passionate about, or what the end goal of my task is. And that's what it's ultimately there to do.
So it's going to be all those ROIs that are going to really give that you. And of course, the other thing is the license cost is not the only cost. You're going to need professional services, support to be able to ensure that you get adopt to user pull through and all of those things as well. So it is an absolute different culture that you will be bringing into your business.
Yeah, we were saying earlier, like everyone is focused on the cybersecurity side of their organization. They're worried about the breach of of their organization, and they've got all the locks and keys done on their businesses. But when AI is involved in their business, AI can see everything, and that is the important thing about AI. Going back to your point, if the data in your organization can be viewed by anyone, AI can read it and respond and query it. So if I was, say I was, my name was mentioned in an HR meeting or something, or my name was mentioned in a business review, I could ask Copilot, is my name, reference any document that my name is included on, and it could reference them back. Even if I don't know where that document is stored, it could reference the document that I mentioned in, and that's the scary thing about it. And yes, you can go and assign a Copilot license to people, but all the document security is one of the biggest tasks that every business has to look at immediately. Is the compliance story of your organization. What does your data say about your organization? Where is it kept? How is it stored? Where can people access it? Because there's always going to be personal identifiable information in an organization. You just need to make sure that the right people have access to that information, and nobody that's generalist in an organization can. And that is a huge task.
The whole topic of subject access request takes on a whole new meaning, doesn't it? So cool. So I suppose, my next question really is about, you hear about all of this, and I bet there are lots of our customers sitting there thinking, where on earth would I start with this? This is such a big change that I just don't know. Even if I'm an MD or a CEO of a business and I'm thinking this could be, how would I start this? So have you guys got any tips on how you might suggest that smaller businesses might start that sort of toe dipping in the world of AI?
Well, the obvious one is content creation, because there are free AIs that you can use for that. I think the most important question that the business needs to ask itself is what's my objective? Right. So it's something I try and do with a product side, is that, and this goes back to people's adoption of AI and people's fear of it, in that if you're couching your AI objective in terms that help people understand how it's going to improve things, right? So you're thinking about AI, what 3 or 5 things, problems have you got? And start with those problems. Start with the most important one, and then backtrack from there and see if any kind of AI can help solve that problem. If you randomly launch into things, specifically with a cost-based reduction type thing, then the chances are you're going to get a lot of people's backs up. So if you use it to solve problems that help people do their jobs, you'll have such a lovely experience front to back. But don't forget about your end customer journey. So there are things that businesses do for their own reasons, which are not necessarily appreciated by customers. For example, there's been a huge kickback in certain areas of France for self-checkout, right? So it's in the business interests to lower their headcount and get lots of machines in. However, people don't like dealing with machines. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I've got a load of complicated stuff. I want to take one thing back. I've got some clothes with some security tags on, and I've got a load of loose fruit, right? It's going to be a nightmare to get that through the self-checkout, so I don't want to bother. And if that brand has chosen to make the stores in my area 100% self-checkout, then I just won't go to any of them. So bear in mind what you're trying to solve and whether that's actually going to negatively impact your customer experience. There was also, they gave Tetris to an AI to play, right? So this is about business outcome, right? So the goal of Tetris is obviously to not lose your lives, right? So because pause is a function within the game, the AI chose to pause and therefore went, job done. I'm never going to lose a life. Well, and this is back to context, right? So anyway, sorry.
I know. I think it's really good advice, because actually, I think the way you get engagement and adoption is thinking about the problem first. So one of the things, and I think we do this in our daily lives in business, is you think about, right, I've got all this data. how do I turn that data into insight? And then how do I turn that insight into actionable stuff that might help me? Whereas you turn that around and say, let's look at the problem and then look at the insight I need and therefore the data I need to collect to drive it. So yeah, I think that's perfect. Peter, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely, I think you made some great points there, Andrew. I think it's absolutely about what problem are you trying to solve, right? And that's not just an artificial intelligence thing, that's a technology thing, right? We always speak about business outcomes, right? Because that's what we care about. I think it's naturally very difficult to look at how your business can engage with AI from a kind of 1,000-foot view, right? Because we are humans, we are individuals, right? So I think in terms of a starting point, it's much easier to look at personal outcomes, right? And that could be as simple as bullet points. What do I do in a day? What is my day-to-day job? How much of my time is spent responding to emails or Googling things, right? And of those activities, which ones can be automated? And then you could go a step further and say, which ones would I feel comfortable automating? For example, I would personally not feel comfortable having some AI assistant respond to all my emails. But it's a very different conversation if it's then saying, I'm going to send this email and I get to review it and kind of look at it like that, right? So I think if you're struggling to see how you can actually adopt AI in a meaningful and useful way, probably the simplest way to start is looking at what do you spend your time doing, and what do you want to automate in your personal life?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And do you think you'll get to a point where companies will mandate the use of AI for some tasks? So you could envisage that while people have got a choice, the adoption and the integration within a business will be fairly limited. Whereas if you say, for example, every time we write a complaint letter or respond to a complaint letter to a customer, we're going to use AI. Full stop, that's what's going to happen. Do you think you'll see companies starting to do that?
I think very possibly. Sorry, Peter. I was just going to say very, very possibly, right? Because there's some fantastic statistic out there, and I wish I could remember exactly what it was, but it's to do with human error, right? And human error causes us so many problems. As soon as the error rate of artificial intelligence and the ways that we're using it is less than the likelihood of human error, then I think that's the point at which it might become mandated, right? It comes back to your point earlier, Peter, that often we are using AI without necessarily realising we are, or maybe we do consciously know it, but we're not seeing it as an artificial intelligence. We are just seeing it as a tool like any other. And it's a time-saving thing. We are bad as humans at managing our time, generally speaking. And so if organisations feel that they can improve on productivity by mandating the use of artificial intelligence, then I think it's likely that they would.
Perfect. Peter?
Yeah, just add on to that. So going back to saving time and how we're not maybe always using it to the best of what we know of, one of the key things I can see happening is where you want to get ready for AI and you're kind of worried about where do I start. One of the things that I'm thinking about a lot of is hybrid working. Since COVID happened, everyone has got some sort of hybrid working policy, and we're going to have to start thinking of an AI policy within work as well. I think that's going to be the scary thing as well. Is as much as we can start thinking about AI and we can start thinking of the challenges it can solve, you're going to have to think of a policy or some sort of contract or terms and conditions in place for your employees to follow. The amount of businesses to this day that are having employees using ChatGPT to solve business queries. It's quite scary because they're sharing potentially sensitive information into this search engine for AI, and they could be using something a bit more protected, maybe like the Copilot side of things. But where it's coming to solve the business challenges, it's sometimes the unknown business challenges that you should be thinking about as well, such as, are my workers, got a poor work-life balance? Are they spending their evenings responding to emails and finishing tasks that are they're taking so much time that AI could have helped them achieve faster? Or is it a case of where users are trying to solve a task in regards to responding to an email and things like that? I sometimes use an app called Find Time, which allows me to pick the time slots of when people can book meetings into my diary. I could absolutely hand that over to AI and say, where I'm free go and book a meeting in,
Yeah.
you know, for these people where I haven't responded back to the email.
Yeah.
That's the type of things that I could definitely see AI help me better with as well.
No, I absolutely think you're right. The one thing I like is there's a bit of research done that says that there are companies now that can use AI to predict the people, the staff, and the employees they've got in their business that are going to leave even before the individuals know. So, I'd quite like that piece to know which of my sales team are thinking about leaving to go somewhere else. Brilliant. Okay, so I think that's been really useful. We're just butting up onto time now. So, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of you. I mean, I think it's been really good discussion. The good news is that we have access to these wonderful partners of ours all of the time. So, if you as a customer are just thinking that you'd like to explore certain elements of this further, either with Chess or with our partners, we'd be more than happy to set that up. So you can either go to our website and book a consultation, and then we can do that, or just follow up with your account manager. So that's the end of this panel. Please do hang around for this afternoon. We've got some great sessions coming up. The first one of those is a guest speaker. So we've got Daniel Hume, who's an AI expert, and he's really specialist around emerging technologies. And the reality is, I've had a sneak preview of this session. If you thought we were at a high level now, he is at 1,000 miles in the sky. He is really high level, and some of the thoughts that it made me think about in terms of what the future could mean around AI was quite incredible. So please join us for that, and have a good afternoon.